Okay, so I'm going to be talking about Arlington County. We have a stormwater, a BMP incentive program called StormwaterWise, and I think this is me. Oh, great. And I'm also wearing the hat for Arlington County. I also sit on the board of the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council, which is a nonprofit dedicated to promoting sustainable landscaping and restoring the Chesapeake Bay. So my presentation is kind of divided into two parts. I'm going to talk about the StormwaterWise program and then some of the work that the council has been doing, because a lot of it is relevant to you all today. Okay, so StormwaterWise Landscapes has been around for, it's going into its second year. And so a lot of what I'm going to be talking about are what the program was like last year in 2012 and what we've incorporated going into our next year. And then this incorporates some of the lessons that we've learned. Some of the lessons we've learned, we haven't incorporated solutions to those issues yet, but we're working on them. So our program serves Arlington private property owners, it's residential property owners, homeowner association property owners, and commercial property owners, anyone who owns private property. And it functions as a reimbursement program. So homeowners or property owners must spend the money first, and then they get a certain amount of a reimbursement. We see this primarily as an education and outreach program. Despite the focus today on crediting, that is something that we are interested in, but for now we see this primarily as an education and outreach initiative. Starting in 2012 was our pilot program. We had 40 folks participating that year, 5 HOAs and 35 residential properties. And going into the next year, we're accepting 60 participants. And we're going to be doing that in a couple of different rounds, and I'll explain that in a minute. So this is just lays out the structure of our program in these 2 years. One of the things you'll see is that we supported 6 practices, and those are listed here at different levels of support based on how much it costs to install them. But one of the things that we have done in 2013 is that we've increased the amount of those incentives. You'll see that the incentive for rain gardens, pervious pavement, and green roofs, and also we included now pavement removal is now $1,500. We just found that $1,000 wasn't really enough to incentivize these practices for a lot of private property owners. And the other thing that we're offering is an additional grant for people who are willing to enter into a stormwater maintenance and monitoring agreement. And this is the legal agreement that if you were undergoing redevelopment and were incorporating a BMP as part of your required stormwater management, you would enter into. It goes with the property deed. And we are asking folks to voluntarily enter into that agreement, and we're providing them with an incentive to do so. One of the things you'll notice is that our reimbursement is 50% of the project cost or the incentive, whichever is less. And this draws heavily on the Rainscapes Reward Program that's operating in Montgomery County, Maryland. The other thing that you'll notice is that we have green, at the bottom you'll see it says Green Home Choice projects only for cisterns and green roofs. What we found with cisterns and green roofs is that for homes that are already built, it's really difficult to incorporate a green roof and use the water properly. Incorporate a green roof, and it's really difficult to incorporate a cistern and have a plan to use the water. So it's one thing to install a cistern, but it's another thing to make sure that water is actually being used around the property. So those are being incorporated into our Green Home Choice program, which is a green building program in Arlington County. So how are we funding this program? It took us about 1.5 years to figure out how to fund this. It was quite an ordeal. What we ended up doing was identifying a fiscal agent, which is Arlingtonians for a Clean Environment. They are partnering with us on this program. And so homeowners apply for their grants to ACE and receive their grants from ACE. We also are funding the program with county stormwater funds. We have 2 types of funding. We have a watershed management fund, which had historically been an in lieu fee repository. It's not really receiving very much funding right now because we've closed that loophole for development, but it still exists and still has funding in it. And we also are funding it through our stormwater fund, which is a tax. It's 1.3 cents on every $100 of property tax, assessed property value. And we also, for 2013, 2014, have an $80,000 NIFWIF grant. And so you'll see that our budget has gone up quite considerably. In the pilot year, we committed about $40,000 to it, and we dedicated what we thought would be about a quarter of a staff person. You'll see that didn't work out very well. So now we're funding it about 3 times that level, and we are realizing we need at least 1 full-time staff person to implement this. And the iPad is on here as a resource, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So just to show you how our program works, we have a set application period. It's open now for the 2013 program. After the application period closes, we select usually we have more applications than we can actually incorporate into the program. We select the participants, we go out and we do site assessments on each of the properties, and then we have some set deadlines throughout the time period where the property owner selects which practice they're going to install. We ask them to submit a project plan for us, and then we go out and we do follow-up inspections, and then the reimbursements will take place. And you'll see that in 2013, we're going to be doing 2 overlapping rounds to accommodate all of those 60 participants. And the second round will begin in July of 2013, and will run through the spring of 2014. So this is how we help our property owners. We have found that property owners really need a lot of assistance with this, and that is something we were anticipating, but it's been more than we thought. So we do this initial site assessment where we recommend practices, and we actually provide some guidance on some technical portions of those practices related to the specific site. And when we do that, we use our iPad, and what that is we have our GIS system, we have a template, we can enter data about the property, it goes into the iPad and connects to our GIS database. We also can call up maps of the property with all of the easements, all of the public utilities, the slopes, where the resource protection areas are. That's all available to us to draw up on that iPad. So we have our geographic information with us in the field, and then can submit information that goes back into our geographic information system. And we use this both during the site assessment, and we use it during the follow-up inspection, where we're recording how large is the rain garden that was installed, all those kinds of details at the end of the process. We also have provided homeowners with a list of contractors. We don't approve them, but they're people who have gone through training that we know of, and that we are familiar with the content of the training. And they're also contractors that have been used by other residents, and we've been out and we've inspected their projects. One of the greatest time-intensive portions of this is the ongoing technical and moral support. So even though theoretically we're only visiting the homeowners twice, there are follow-up phone calls, there's questions, there is, have you met this particular deadline? Have you sent in your receipt so we can give you your money? You wouldn't think you'd need to do that, but you do need to do that. So I know I'm talking to, most of you are already sold on the idea of doing these BMP incentive programs, but in Arlington's case, more than 50% of our impervious cover is privately owned. We figured out that we can retrofit about 11% of the publicly owned impervious cover. To meet our TMDL allocations, we need to retrofit 49%. So we need to find another 39% of impervious cover somehow. We also had lots of expectations from our residents. They saw these programs going on in Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County, Maryland, and they wanted to know why we weren't offering them. And we had some experience with a regional rain barrel program, And as part of that, we had been surveying folks, and they had given us the feedback that this was like rainbows were their gateway drug. They were ready for the next step. And so we knew that there was a pool of residents out there who are willing to jump into this if we provided them with the opportunity. And we really need to increase the capacity of the conservation landscaping industry. I think all of us recognize that. We need more contractors who are familiar with these practices, and we need to incentivize that somehow. So this incentivizes not only our residents, but also our business community. And this is an MS4 permit requirement for us. In the permit that's now currently out for public comment, this program is incorporated in it. So what were our results in 2012? We had 22 of the 40 participants actually follow through. Some of them implemented one practice, some of them implemented more than one. Actually, it was fairly common for them to implement more than one. And we didn't spend all of the money. We spent about $22,000, but we definitely used a lot more staff time than we thought we would. Pervious pavement and rain gardens were incredibly popular. Of course, green roofs were not. And even though we were not trying to get credit for this, we did do kind of a back-of-the-envelope calculation. And just for pervious pavement, rain gardens, and cisterns, we calculated that we were treating about 0.2 acres of impervious cover with the sediment loads you see on this slide. And I used the Watershed retrofit guidance to calculate those reductions. And so we think we get a thumbs up for the program. Enough that we're willing to commit more resources to it in the coming year. And this is just an example of one of the projects that was installed. This is a property owner who had mostly lawn and a basketball court in her backyard. She took out about, I'd say, half of the lawn, put in a rain garden, directed her rear downspouts into the rain garden instead of onto the basketball court and down her driveway, and then took out the basketball court and put in a dry set stone patio, which we did not fund, but we did fund conservation landscaping and a rain garden for her. So in terms of lessons moving forward, staff time is a huge cost. I've talked about that. We also found out these practices are really expensive. We had an idea of what they would cost, and we found that if homeowners could do them themselves, they could be fairly inexpensive, but the majority of homeowners were not going to do them themselves. And in that case, they ended up being very expensive, much more on the high end of what we were forecasting. We also found out that the homeowners who had drainage problems were more likely to follow through than people who were being altruistic, or also homeowners who were interested in habitat were more likely to follow through. And we found that some of the problems our citizens had were financial resources. Family things came up, and some of them thought it was a great idea, but just couldn't wrap their mind around how to actually implement it. And we also found out that connecting with qualified contractors was incredibly difficult, even with the guidance that we provided. So in 2013, we have a few goals: better guidance, more qualified contractors, and a couple of options that are guaranteed to help us provide measurable water quality benefits. And that contractor piece is very important to us and kind of leads me into the next part of this, which is about the Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional Certification Program, which is being promoted by CCLC and developed by CCLC, which is the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council, in combination with Maryland Sea Grant. I've mentioned what the Chesapeake Conservation Landscaping Council is. The nonprofit has been around for about 10 years, and it is a group of organizations and individuals who are dedicated to sustainable landscaping. And that includes representatives from DC government, Montgomery County, Maryland, Arlington County, Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, nonprofits, landscape professionals. So it's a very holistic group. And one of our key events is our Turning a New Leaf conference, and that's coming up this November also. As far as the certification program, it's going to be an individual certification for landscape professionals, and the focus is on small-scale practices like rain gardens, bioswales, riparian buffer restoration, native landscaping, and rainwater harvesting. And eventually it will have 3 tiers: design, installation, and maintenance, but our focus right now is on maintenance, developing the core curriculum for this, the core proficiencies, and then that maintenance tier. We're starting it out as a pilot program in 2 Maryland counties, and it will be like most certifications. There'll be an application, either training or demonstrated experience, and an exam. And I think that the argument for certification is pretty clear. I think, Richard, you mentioned this. We have a lot of BMPs that are not functioning, and as a region, we are dedicating a lot of money and resources to installing these BMPs. And we need to incentivize the landscape community to both grow their knowledge of these, and we need to have more contractors who can install them and maintain them properly, and we need to reduce all of our duplicative training efforts, which I think this conference is dedicated to. So where this program stands right now is we're seeking the appropriate partner, and we're seeking funding and pursuing the certification, branding, the core curriculum, and those competencies and standards for the maintenance certification.